Hi, welcome back to another video. So as you would have seen from the title and the thumbnail, today's video is about me reading Singlit for National Day. So in Singapore, our National Day is on 9th August, and I have done this video before in which I read I think 3 Singlit books also for National Day, and I thought why not do it again this year. So yeah, that's the video concept. And as for the books that I'm going to be reading, I think I want to introduce them as I read. So the first book that I read for this video, because I've since finished it, is If It Were Up to Mrs. Dada by Carissa Fu. And I got this I think at I have to find the video, but I did a video on it wherein I went to, okay, that's weird, I swear I found this and I filmed it in a video, but I can't find the actual video, so it's fine. But I think I got this second hand at like a local bookstore in Singapore, so all the pages are yellow already, and actually this is an annotated copy, so this person is actually very intellectual, because normally when I read I'm just like a vibes kind of person, so I wouldn't really think too much on what the author is trying to portray. But for example, let me find, so look at the annotation over here, like wow. So the quote that the person highlighted was, "We are one people, one nation, one Singapore." And they said, when Singapore tries to create one common identity through a common narrative, is it necessary? Then again, is it possible to create a place of belonging without a common thing to hold on to? And I was like, oh my god. So yeah, definitely not as intellectual as the person who first owned this book. But basically this book is about Cheryl Dada, who is staying in a nursing home, if I'm not wrong. And on the day of where the story begins, it is National Day in Singapore, and she's poking her nose into everybody's business as they prepare for the celebration, which is a party that night. Slowly, she discovers how her life converges with theirs, even as she begins to learn who she is. So I didn't sense any trigger warnings from this book. The narrative of this is really from Cheryl Dada's perspective, in which it's kind of like rambling and stream of consciousness, elderly generation kind of thinking, I would say. So it's not the best writing. Not sure if that was intentional, because it's to mimic how Cheryl Dada, who is an elderly, is like thinking and therefore speaking. But another thing that I noticed was there is a lot of profanity used in this, in that Cheryl keeps saying the F word, and then there's even like a whole discourse on how she's not the most vulgar person in the home because there are Hokkiens or Teochews who curse in their language and it's even more coarse and things like that. I honestly didn't really enjoy this, which is kind of sad, because Singlit, right, trying to like promote local works and things like that, but this just wasn't a book for me. The parts that I did enjoy of this book, however, were the parts about food, because Singapore is really like a food nation and things like that, right? We have so many cuisines all in one place, and I did like when there were certain things that were localized, as in there are a lot of things that's localized and mentioned that I read about, and I'm like, yes, that's like my experience growing up in Singapore as well. So for example, you have random people working near, they will stand near MRT stations, and then they will try to stop you and sell you insurance or things like that. And then there's also all the different mentions of food, like chendol, I don't know, all kinds. And then you even have mentions of Singapore history, on how it was Sang Nila Utama who discovered Singapore, things like that. Before that, it was a Malay fishing village. We also even have like the skills future credits that are credited to those above the age of 25 for you to use the money to go for courses to enhance your skills, things like that. So I would say good that, I mean, if you pick this up, you get to learn different bits about Singapore, but I wouldn't say that the story itself is the best. Yeah. So in the end, I decided to give this 2 stars, and again, I'm very sorry, but that was just my reading experience with this book. I wasn't grabbed. I was honestly quite bored, apart from the fact that I was discovering things about Singapore. So yeah, not my favorite But I mean, if you're interested based on what I shared, then do pick it up and read it for yourself because everyone's experience will be different. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say for that book. And then I have since progressed on to reading the second book, which is Sugar Bread. So this one is the finalist for the 2015 Epigram Books Fiction Prize. Oh, I forgot to say, this one is longlisted for the 2017 Epigram Books Fiction Prize. These are my tabs so far. I again don't really remember where I got this from. But this story, we follow Pin, who is 10 years old. She's primary 4, and we are learning about her life in general, on how she goes to a Christian school as a Sikh girl, S-I-K-H, her relationship with her mother's relationship with her grandmother, which is her mother's mother, her experiences basically. So she's a bursary girl at the Christian school, and she is facing racial taunts from the bus uncle. Her meddlesome grandmother comes to live with them, so then she also has to deal with that. Currently, I just reached part 2 of the book actually, so about 50% in. These are my tabs so far. Actually really enjoying this much more than if we were up to Mrs. Dada, because from the start we were following Pin, who was following her mum to the wet market in Singapore. I say that as if it's a central location, but actually there are a lot of wet markets around different neighborhoods of Singapore. Her experience was so similar to mine, in like how my mum also asked me to follow her to go to the wet market and help her to carry stuff basically. And then there are all the different smells from like the fish stall and then the meat stall. I don't even know what to call it, but yeah. We also have mentions of food here as well. Slightly changed the angle. I went to check on my highlights. There were a lot of common experiences basically. For example, they talked about Paddle Pop ice cream, which I filmed a clip of the marketing poster, but not the actual Paddle Pop because there wasn't any. And then they also mentioned coffee shops in Singapore wherein it used to be just white tables with red plastic chairs, but now they have since upgraded to different kinds of chairs and tables, and then there will be different stalls selling different kinds of foods. So for example, it could be your wonton mee, prawn mee, economic rice, duck rice, Western stall, things like that. And also economic rice was also mentioned in this, except that they call it point rice because you have to point at what you want as like a quick way to get the workers to understand what dishes you want. And then it's kind of like cheap, not that cheap anymore because inflation, right? And then especially if it's in areas that are close to work areas like CBD, it'll be quite expensive. But yeah, it was all these experiences that resonated with me that made me enjoy the book a lot more. And the story is also more interesting because there is Pin's relationship with her mother and their history of being Punjabis, and how it's like explaining to people, because Punjabis are not really super common in Singapore, and where we're at currently, we are trying to figure out what happened with Pin's mother and Pin's grandmother when they were younger, because there seems to be some conflict. So yeah, that's about it so far. Really enjoying it because the writing is so good, and I'm just gonna come back and update again when I have finished this book, and then I'll update on my reading and my whole reading experience. In the meantime, I have filmed as many clips as I can of what I feel are kind of Singaporean things, so you can enjoy that. Okay, hi, I'm going to have to speak a little louder than normal because both my mics are broken. Yeah, just bear with me, okay? So I finished, it's a different day already. I know it doesn't look like it because I'm wearing the same shirt, but I have since finished Sugar Bread, and these are my tabs. Actually, I don't think I tapped anymore after the clip that I showed you previously. And as always, we will start with trigger warnings first. Trigger warnings for racism, racial slurs, sexual assault, child death, ableism, mental illness, misogyny, and pedophilia. So this story, I think I kind of covered everything in my previous clip, but as we went along in the book, we got to find out what exactly happened to Pin's mother in her childhood, such that she
has strained relations with her own mother now, as well as her brother and things like that. And I kind of saw it coming like a few pages before it actually happened. In the middle though, the discussion became centered a lot on God, their God, and how Pin tries to rebel against God, and how relations in the family are a little bit strained after her grandmother came to stay with them. We saw Pin's mother retreating back into herself. She used to make a lot of different kinds of dishes at home, be it like curry or Chinese dishes, but when her mother comes to stay over, all she makes is roti, because that's what they eat when they were growing up. She just tries to stay in her room most of the time because the grandmother would always say things to criticize Pin's mother and things like that. I wasn't really a fan of that moment when the grandmother came over to stay and then things changed, but I can see why it had to happen because the relationship had to develop somehow. But yeah, my favorite parts were the beginning and the end. The beginning was because of all the descriptions of the food and the environment and Pin and her mother, and then at the end when things are slowly starting to get back to normal, we find out what actually happened, things like that. And the story is complete, but it also feels like very slice of life in a way, because the ending isn't like a very bombastic ending. It's just like a very peaceful ending. Things go back to how they were. Pin starts to learn more about her mom and herself, and overall I decided to give this 3.75 stars, which is an improvement from if it were up to Mrs. Dada. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about this book, and I'll come back when I have started reading the next book and to give my comments on it. Hi, so I am back to close out this video because I have since finished The Punkawala and the Prostitute by Wesley Leon Aruzu, and this is the last book that I'll be reading for this vlog, except that I've already finished it. So this is another singlet, of course, and it's a historical fiction in the 1800s, I believe, and we mainly follow two main characters, Oseki, who is shipped to Singapore believing that she is going to get married, except that she becomes a prostitute by force. She's trying to come to terms with the fact that she was tricked. She believes that it is the person who came to their family acting as her fiancé that betrayed them, but then also, is it really that person or is it her father with a gambling problem? And then we have our other main character, Gobind, who is a death convict from India, who is currently serving his sentence as a punkawala to a British hunter obsessed with killing Rimal Satan, a man-eating tiger of mythic proportions. So a punkawala is the person who keeps pulling on the cord to make the fan continue glowing. And then along the way, their paths intertwine and they begin to face their inner demons to find their humanity and their way home. The writing was really good, and not strangely, but what was unique about this book compared to the previous two is that this didn't really have a focus on the food at all. This was rather on the characters. So when I was reading this, I wasn't really like reminded of parts of Singapore. Maybe like the fact about the man-eating tigers, because I kind of remember that was some part of our history some time ago. But apart from that, like, this was totally new for me. I was just like trying to understand the world and things like that. Trigger warnings for death, gore, sexual assault and suicide. And because Oseki is a prostitute, so it does go into quite detailed descriptions of like her activities at night in the brothel, things like that. And it's really quite sad because all these women were forced to become prostitutes, and how they're being there against their will. They have a debt to repay because to pay for the ship that brought them here, things like that, you know. I actually found it quite interesting because we follow Oseki's chapters and then we also follow Gobind's chapters along with his master as they tried to hunt down the tiger. And also another interesting thing was they have chapter breaks. Like within the chapter, you'll see this tiger symbol and then the point of view will change. So it would either be from third person person to first person or first person to third person of the same character, which I found interesting. But towards the end, as things got more complicated and more suspenseful, I kind of got lost on what was happening. And then the ending, I was kind of confused also. So in the end, I decided to give this 3.5 stars, and out of the 3, my favorite would still be Sugar Bread, because the plot was more like I could follow along more easily. But maybe this is just a book that's not super for me, in that I didn't really understand the last quarter of the book. But if what I've been telling you so far is interesting, then please do read this, and maybe you might enjoy this more than I did. And yeah, so with that, I have come to the end of this video. Let me just bring together all the books. These are the 3 books that I read for this video. Hope you enjoyed and got to understand a little bit more about Singapore's culture and history. Happy birthday to Singapore, 59th birthday. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel to see more of such content. I hope you're having a great day or a great week whenever or wherever you're watching. Remember to stay hydrated, and I'll see you in my next video.